I've spent decades investigating Nazi Germany and its leaders, and anyone who has spent any time on this subject inevitably will learn things about the private lives of such men. Much is of course well known, from Adolf Hitler's girlfriends and strange attitudes to sex, to Dr. Goebbels' behaviour that had more in common with a rutting goat, a man who happily abused his powerful position to bed a series of starlets and actresses despite playing the happily married family man, to Heinrich Himmler and his unlikely affair and secret love children. Let's just say the public image Nazi leaders projected to an adoring German public was often severely at variance with their private behaviour and predilections. But of course, such an accusation is by no means limited to just Nazis, but to any group of powerful men throughout history, then and now. But one top Nazi leader has seemingly confounded attempts to find his truth, and that man was Hermann Göring. In my many years of researching Nazis, I have come across the rumours concerning Göring's sexuality and nature enough times to know that something wasn't quite honest in the Reichsmarschall's public image, that something was being hidden or perhaps repressed. However, I feel confident in stating that Hermann Göring was not gay, but he most probably did exhibit what psychoanalysts term a post-sexual practice, and I will tell you what exactly that was later on. You can understand how, during his own lifetime, Göring raised more than a few eyebrows amongst the circle of men that he worked among. He was the only senior Nazi leader who regularly wore makeup, sometimes in public. Göring's taste in ostentatious jewellery and often rather effeminate clothing and uniforms set tongues wagging that the apparently twice happily married Reichsmarschall was a secret homosexual, or at least that he was bisexual. Such rumours and gossip have of course entered popular culture since World War II, and Göring has often been portrayed privately as effeminate or indeed as a transvestite, notably in the television movie from 1988, The Man Who Lived at the Ritz, where Göring was played by the brilliant Joss Ackland. Contemporary witnesses commented repeatedly on Göring's flamboyant dress sense. In fact, among senior Nazis, the Reichsmarschall was sometimes referred to as the perfumed Nero after the dissolute Roman emperor. Swiss diplomat Karl Burckhardt witnessed Göring relaxing at home at Karenhall, his huge country estate north of Berlin, named after his deceased Swedish first wife, whom he continued to revere and worship after death, much to the consternation of his second wife, German actress Emmy Sonnemann. Burckhardt recalled Göring reclining on an ottoman sofa, with his trouser leg rolled up to the knee, exposing red silk stockings like a cardinal, with a petulant look on his bloated face, his mouth sunken and puckered like an old woman's. Another houseguest, German diplomat Ulrich von Hassel, recalled that Göring would change his outfit several times a day, often appearing for dinner in front of guests wearing a kimono, or a Roman-style toga fastened with a heavy gold clasp and wearing fur-lined bedroom slippers, fingers dripping with huge ostentatious rings. In fact, he appears to have had, judging from witness testimony, a vast array of peculiar outfits, gaudy, ostentatious, sensational, and somewhat removed from his image as a military leader. I shall add again that makeup was often worn with such outfits, and indeed, it was noted on one occasion that Göring attended the annual Heroes Memorial Day parade in 1943 in Berlin, dressed in his unique powder blue Reichsmarschall's uniform and greatcoat, wearing bright red leather jackboots and makeup, his jewel-encrusted fingers gripping his jewel-encrusted Reichsmarschall's baton. Eyebrows were certainly raised. Benito Mussolini's son-in-law, the Italian foreign minister Count Ciano, recalled meeting Göring in 1941 and commented on his appearance, that Göring was wearing a fur coat like, quote, a high-grade prostitute wears to the opera, end quote. Some clues to Göring's personality may be deduced from his pre-Nazi life. Born into an upper-class German family on his father's side, but with a working-class mother, he grew up in castles owned by his Jewish godfather, who was also his mother's lover. He was raised amongst considerable luxury and a small army of servants, and was plainly addicted to high-class living in later life, becoming so rich and powerful that he was able to live like, and indeed dress like a Roman emperor, in a collection of beautiful homes, surrounded by vast quantities of both purchased and looted art. He was physically brave, certainly as a younger man. His Pour le Mérite, Imperial Germany's highest award for gallantry, attests to that fact, having served as a World War I fighter pilot who downed over 20 Allied planes in combat over the Western Front. However, following his being shot in the thigh and wounded during the 1921 Behaviour putsch in Munich, when Hitler and the Nazis had attempted to seize power by force, he later suffered a nervous breakdown in exile in Sweden and ended up in a mental hospital, and also, some said, addicted to morphine for most of the rest of his life, although this has been challenged to some degree. During his time in a Swedish mental institution in 1925, his medical report noted that Göring was highly emotional and a self-centered hysteric suffering from a persecution complex. He was also said to possess an exaggerated self-confidence. One of his doctors said that Göring, now a drug addict who had bullied his first wife, lacked fundamental moral courage. These aspects of his personality were to be considerably magnified by the addition of huge power, fame, and money. Göring was noted in World War II by those who had to work with him as being lazy, corrupt, brusque with his Luftwaffe pilots and ministerial staff, but also able to laugh at himself, which was unique amongst Nazi leaders, and hugely flamboyant in dress. His obsession with having himself awarded medals and decorations was another peculiar aspect of his personality. He was never satisfied, and though a holder of Imperial Germany's highest award, and later awarded Nazi Germany's highest equivalents, the Knight's Cross, and later the Grand Cross of the Iron Cross, the latter a unique award to him only, he always wanted more. On one occasion, when he discovered that his attempts to garner for himself some high Italian award had failed, Göring's response was to burst into tears. He often wore excessive amounts of medals, or special improved versions of such medals. For example, his Grand Cross was made of platinum, and he also wore a diamond-encrusted pilot observer badge, and so on, fueling rumours that he was rather like a woman with a jewellery box, rather than a heroic soldier. He bloated up, losing his good looks, looking increasingly unhealthy and debauched, while ordinary Germans suffered wartime rationing. But does any of this mean that he was gay? No, it doesn't. In fact, some authors have noted that Göring exhibited mostly in private, due to his clothes, makeup, and jewellery, a tendency towards transvestism, that is, a man who derives sexual pleasure from dressing in female clothing. I and many others would dispute this. If you look closely at what witnesses said of Göring's sartorial tastes in private, the kimonos, togas, etc., he wasn't dressing as a woman at all, despite the effeminate use of makeup and jewellery. He was in fact dressing as a very glamorous and slightly effeminate man. What I mean is, Göring's uniforms and clothing were male, but completely over the top, to the point of becoming caricature, a peacock dressed almost in stage costumes. No rumours exist that Göring enjoyed male company in a sexual way, nor any disgruntled former boyfriends have emerged in the past 8 decades since his death alleging that he was a homosexual or bisexual. But there is a name for Göring's predilection. It is found in psychology, and it's a new one on me. I'd never heard of it before. Hermann Göring was, according to some experts, a homoevestite. So what is homoevestism? It is a particular sexual preference for same-sex clothing, as opposed to cross-dressing. One who identifies as a homoevestite would derive sexual pleasure from clothing and behaviour that is considered normative to their own gender. But importantly, the wearing of the clothes of one's own gender, either obsessively, such as a man who only wears a tie and a suit all the time, every day, or as in the case of Guring, with exaggeration, the comic opera uniforms, the strange hunting outfits, the Roman dress and kimonos and makeup, the excessive medals, accoutrements, and jewellery. Homeovestism was first coined by Greek psychoanalyst George Zavitzianos. I'd be interested to hear from any psychiatrists or psychologists who have seen this program, and whether you think homoevestism could be applied to Hermann Göring. From the available evidence, once again, Göring apparently wasn't homosexual, nor was he bisexual, nor even a transvestite, but clearly he was very different from those around him, and homoevestism seems to explain his dress and behaviour fairly accurately. Many thanks for watching. Please subscribe and share, and also visit my audiobook channel, War Stories with Mark Felton. You can also help to support both of my channels at PayPal and Patreon. Details in the description box below.